Okay, the recording and the transcription have now started. So again, you're welcome to come on, but just remember that you will be recorded. And of course, these have all been uploaded. Previous ones have all been uploaded to YouTube, and you can see them on the YouTube channel, and I gave you a link. I won't do that every week. That was just to remind you that this is happening. Okay, so last week we started talking about governance, and we did it on a fairly theoretical level. We talked about what governance was and what it might do. So this week I want to start off by showing you how it's actually implemented in a specific organisation. And I've said this at least twice before, but I'll say it for a third time because I know some people were late joining us. You'll see a lot of documents that are from the public sector, and that's simply because the public sector documents are available to us because they have to be published. Organisations tend not to publish these types of document. They tend to see them as proprietary, not surprisingly. So we'll look at one, and it is for a local authority. And we started talking last week about how a core part of governance was giving an aim to an organisation, to set what the aims of the organisation were, its goals, what the organisation was going to do. So come on, computer, you can do it. There we go. So apparently it can't do it. Okay, so here's the agenda for a local council. It's 4 years old, doesn't matter, because it's the principles that we want to talk about. And you'll see that here is the agenda, and we'll ignore most of this stuff because what I really want to look at is this bit here, the council plan. In other words, what does this organisation want to do? What are its aims? Where does it want to be short term, medium term, and long term? Now, just so you know, all of these documents are, of course, available via your OneNote document. There's links in there to all of the things that you're about to see. So you can look at these at your leisure whenever. Okay. Other thing that's interesting to note is this is a very short document. There's 5 pages on this because this is just the agenda document. They actually published 2 different papers, one with the agenda and one with the papers for the agenda. And you can see that there's a whole pile of sections in this document. For this one meeting, it's 148 pages. I said last week that one of the things that was key to those in governance roles was to be able to understand information and react to that information. So those in a governance position for this organisation would have had these papers before the meeting, and they would be expected to read through them, to understand them, and where they didn't understand them, and let me just take one of them. For further information, please contact. So if there's things that the people on the board don't understand, they go and ask. So the idea is you read this stuff before you get started. You get into the board meeting and then you have your meeting to decide on the proposals in these papers. Now, in general, these proposals are written not by the board, but by staff, which is why it's staff that you can contact for this stuff, these. And that's what your assessment is going to be about. You are the staff making papers for the board. So one of the things that you're going to have to do is give recommendations. So what they're saying is, this is what it's about. In this case, it's the council plan. So what the organisation wants to do, how it sees itself, what it wants to get to. And it's saying what the recommendations are. So again, as part of your role as GRC consultants, you're going to give recommendations. We should do this, 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 and this. Then it goes into a whole lot of detail about why. So here's the stuff for decision in the recommendations, but attached to that is a whole lot of information. Background for the plan. And look what they've got, a mission and a vision. And we talked about those last week. A clear view of what the organisation is for and where it wants to get to. A clear view of what the priorities are. Not all organisation can do everything all at once. If you make everything a priority, nothing's a priority. So you have to be really clear about what the priorities for your organisation are. And that's one of the things that they have done here. These are our priorities for the next 5 years. They talk about what they've done to get to this point. The consultations are spoken about, the information that they get back from those consultations. And then they start talking about what those plans actually are. They start thinking about their vision and their mission. And again, we talked about that last week, and here's the mission statement: working together to improve well-being, prosperity, and equity, which is a fairly good summary of where this organisation wants to be, summed up with a North Ayrshire that's fair for all. So they've simply said, we want everybody to share in this. They then go into more detail. So I've said that you need priorities, but of course, for a large organisation, you need a wee bit more detail around that. You can't just say, be better. If you're ASDA, you don't just say sell more. Well, you might, but it's not going to help much. Maybe you want a wee bit more detail. Maybe if you're ASDA, you want to say, can we grow our clothing sales by 15%? Can we grow our cafe business by 5%? Whatever it happens to be. And here they've done the same sort of thing. They've started to look at themes for the kinds of things that they are going to do. So they're talking about communities, they're talking about the area, and they're talking about what's going to happen in the years ahead. And again, they've set outcomes for each of those. So they're starting to break it down. I've got a high level, breaking it down for different areas, sorting those out, and then trying to understand what would happen at each of those areas. Now, depending on the size of the organisation will depend on how much you want to break that down. Depending on the range of services that they offer, depending on the types of staff that they have and the types of services that they offer, the types of business that they're in, there will be differences. But this general approach about identifying areas and deciding what you want to do with them will stay the same. Does that seem to you a reasonable way to approach this kind of document? Just a quick answer. It's up on the screen. And while people are answering, if the answer is no, what would you do to make it different? No, everyone's happy with it anyway. Well, almost everyone. Some people haven't bothered clicking the button. And the question I have is, have you not noticed? Are you too lazy to click the button? Or have you started the meeting and then just walked away to walk the dog? Hard to tell. So please, if you're in the meeting, please answer. It's anonymous, so I won't be checking up on you, but it is good to get the feedback. Okay, so we're agreed it's a decent way forward. It's a decent way of setting up what it is you want to do and to make that clear. But always the issue with that is if you set up a goal, how do you know that you've achieved it? Well, we've got somebody that says no. Excellent. And I hope the person that says no puts something into the chat to say why they think it's not a good idea. Or just comes off on mic to say why it's not a good idea. Because I'd be really interested to hear that. In the meantime, while they're thinking about that, if we are setting up a goal, if we are setting up a way that we think our organisation should be run and where it should be heading towards, we need to decide whether or not we reach that goal. We can't just do what we're going to do, get to the end and go and declare victory. We have to decide what it is before we start. So we set key performance indicators, KPIs. And again, there's a whole section of that on OneNote. So you can read about KPIs on OneNote. And here they start talking about a performance framework. And one of the ways that they try and achieve the plan is to use what they call a golden thread. If we want to do something, we've said that we want to do it, there needs to be a link from what we want to do, the policy, in a particular place, in this case, something called the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan. So in a particular place, through the general plan. So the council plan, remember, is a strategy part. What we're going to talk about shortly is how that's separate, as we said last week, how that's separate from the management part. Because if you have a strategy plan, the council plan, you need to deliver it. And here they expressly put that out as a different plan, a delivery plan. Here's what we want to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Governance and management. And that then works its way through to each of the services, each of the sections of the organisation, and to the individual staff. So they're going all the way from, here's what we want to do in this particular place, as identified here, will be delivered by this section and these particular people. And we're going to monitor it. We have to monitor the performance. We have to understand whether we're doing what we wanted to do. As I say, you can't declare victory at the end. You can't decide one morning to get up and drive to Edinburgh. Get in the car, start driving, find yourself in Dundee and go, yeah, this is where I wanted to be all along. No, you start at the beginning and say, no, I need to get to Edinburgh. And if you don't get to Edinburgh, you have to understand why. It's the same with a plan. You decide what you're going to get to. You try to understand what, excuse me, what your goals look like, what your performance looks like. And they, of course, should be matched to your strategy, your priorities. And where you're not reaching your plan, you have to say, okay, what are we going to do to make that better? And then finally, we have to make sure that everyone understands how that's set up. So the use of the word here, transparency. We have to understand each of those steps and how they're going to work, and ensure that, in this case, the board are called members. So the board retain control of the direction. So the board still have strategic control and will get information to scrutinise. So at certain points, and again, we talked about this last week, every week, every month, every quarter, whatever it happens to be, at certain points, they will get information. Here was the strategy. Here was the aim. Here's where we are. In this particular case, it's not weekly, monthly, or quarterly, it's actually 6 monthly, which is reasonable. If you've got a 5-year plan, you don't want daily updates. And their recommendation here is 6 months, which is the balance between too much information and too little. Now, remember, of course, that this is a paper that's gone to the board for agreement. The board might disagree. The board might say, no, 3 months, please. We want to keep a stronger hand control of this. It's entirely up to them. This is a recommendation, but they have the ability to change it. But of course, there are always trade-offs. If you say, yes, we want a report every 3 months, then you are telling staff that you want them to spend twice as long creating these reports, reporting back. So it's that trade-off between how long you spend reporting and how long you spend doing. And there's no one size fits all for this. It is different in different places at different times for different reasons. So they're saying 6 months, and they're saying this is how we're going to do it. I'm not going to go into much detail on that. You can look at it at your leisure. But part of the reason I'm not going into it in much detail is it will be different for different organisations. You don't care that there's, under the new structure, there will be 2 directorates, so it doesn't really make any difference in this particular case. So it's specific to this organisation, but it's important that this organisation understands that and how it's going to work. So they go through the whole thing. They try to figure out what they're doing, figure out who will get a report. Here it's saying something called the Cabinet and something called the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. So there's 2 different views on this at different times. In this particular case, what it really means is the ongoing management of the organisation is done by Cabinet. Sorry, I shouldn't have used the word management, but the ongoing scrutiny of the organisation is done by Cabinet, and audit and scrutiny come in as a check on that. It's always good to have 2 sets of eyes on things. So then we get to the final proposals. Do this, 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 and this. It looks at what will happen because of this. So they're thinking about the consequences. Clearly, HR is going to be involved. Who else is going to do the work? What will it do for equality? What will it do for children and young people, for the environment, for the community? So there is a whole load of information about what they're doing before they even get to the plan. Because here in the appendix to this is the whole massive plan itself. Here's what we're going to do. Here's our vision. Here's our mission. Here's the issues that we have. And you'll notice it's done as an infographic. So again, it's supposed to be transparent. It's not supposed to be, you know, it's not supposed to be something that's hidden somewhere. It's supposed to be something that people can get access to. So a whole load of priorities for communities, for the area, for whatever it happens to be. And you see they were in the report itself. Communities, place, and the future. So the thing that was in the report reflected, not surprisingly, in the plan itself. What we want to do, where we want to get to. So that's the kind of overall, this is how we're going to do it. But I did say that it's important that you have specific targets. So here they've done that. They've said what the performance measure is. Percentage of population who are involved in local decision making. They take the start value. So remember this document's from 2019, so their start value was the 2017-18 value, which was 51%. And they've set a target. Now, they haven't set a target of 100%, because that would just be unachievable. They said, okay, can we increase it to 60% rather than 51%? And you'll see that the targets are specific and considered. And the changes are different depending on the type of target that it is. So this one's going from 51 to 60%, but this one's going from 30 to 50, which is quite a massive increase. So they're looking at specific targets, giving themselves, looking at specific aims, giving themselves specific targets to see whether or not they've done what they were going to do. And this will form part of these 6 monthly reports. Where have they got to with these targets? What are the numbers looking at now? Have they gone up or down? Are we reaching the target? So they set up specific values, pages upon pages of them. Okay. Everyone happy with that? Everyone get any questions about that? Now, I'll not go into the next one in great detail, but I just wanted to very quickly show you that one of the things that they're going to look at is numbers. So they will look at the accounts. Is the organisation still okay? Do they still have money? Is there anything that they need to do? And here's exactly why commercial organisations tend not to make these things available. They don't want to tell their competitors how they're doing. But as I say, a governmental organisation doesn't have any choice. Okay, so that's setting the goals. So they call it a council plan. That plan is then available to publish. So that actually goes out. It goes out as a document. So the thing that you saw as an agenda appendix then gets printed off and people can read it. see what it is that they're going to do. The performances will have their own document and they will go out to everything. They will say what changes that they're going to make. They call it transformation. They mean changes. What is going to happen? And in part, it's to do with saving money. What are they going to save and where and how much? And because it's a government, local government, they want to tell people about it. And they want to tell staff about it. So they make a nice big A3 poster that can go up in libraries and community centres and people's offices just to remind people this is what they're trying to do. So all of that is set up as part of the governance to say this is what the organisation is, this is what we want to get to, this is what we're going to do. So James has put a question into the chat saying, do you need to create this kind of thing for the assessment? Now, clearly this is incredibly detailed and your assessment is slightly different. So, and remember there's two different assessments depending on which cohort you're in. So James, I think you're in the MSc, aren't you? So for the MSc, you have to um, explain governance to an organization. So it's a new organization and you're explaining governance to them. Because it's new, you're not creating this whole thing. What you're doing is saying you need to set up governance and it needs to have these kind of functions in it and you need to do this and that. But you won't need to do this, all of this documentation. Um, Similarly for the CPD people, your assessment's slightly different. You've got an existing organization that's expanding. So yours is as a business, whereas the MSc one is a charity. But the same thing applies. Um, you don't have to go into this kind of detail. Again, the idea is saying how, with this expanded business, will your governance aims be best served? So it's about setting up the governance rather than this kind of detail. Okay, James? Okay, so what time about? 5 to 1, 5 to 12. Um, okay, so I do want to talk about how it's set up. I want to talk about how governance is set up, and I also want to look at the difference between the governance and the management. So we've got schemes of delegation and schemes of administration. But I think what we'll do is we're roughly halfway through. It seems a reasonable time to take a break. So unless anyone has any more questions just now, and I am not seeing any. Okay. What we'll do is we'll take a 10-minute break and I'll see you back here in 10. Okay, and we are back. David, are you here? We've asked someone to let you into the... okay. Okay. So we've had a look at some of the things that people in governance positions will be getting up to. So let's think a wee bit more about how that governance is going to be set up. So again, back to our trusty local government documents. And what we have here is something called the scheme of administration. How are things going to work? So what it's going to lay out is all the different aspects to governance. Now, I mentioned last week that you would have a board, but that board would have subcommittees, and perhaps there would be an HR subcommittee, and people who have an interest in, or hopefully a knowledge of HR would serve on that. Or you might have an IT committee, and similar kind of idea. So this one says exactly how that's going to happen. How these committees are set up, who's going to be members, what they will do, and importantly, something called delegation. There's no point setting up subcommittees and then just saying, yeah, go and do something and then come back and let us know what you found out and we'll do it. It's actually a lot better to set it up and say, okay, well, we're giving you the power to go and do this thing. So rather than do it twice, do it once. So you set up a committee, you decide who's in it, you say what they're going to do, and then you say, you now have the power to do this. You have the power to make a decision about which IT system you're going for. Or you have the power to decide about procurement, or whatever it happens to be. Now, this is a general thing. You'll see a whole lot of things about acts and areas and all that kind of stuff. That's clearly a government thing, so we ignore those. But what they have said is what these subcommittees are going to be. And you can see that there's, and even if you've never thought about it before, you can certainly imagine this in terms of what local government looks after. So it looks after education, it looks after licensing and planning. So there's all these different committees to do specific things. Also talks about joint committees. I mentioned this last week about a health committee. So we've got here a committee that has delegated powers from this organisation, but also is involved with another organisation. It then says what rules and regulations are, what you can't do, quite a lot of those, how they'll work, who's going to sit in the chair, how many people need to be there for it to actually be a valid committee, what powers they have, what functions they have. And then it goes through all of those for all of the different committees that it's set up. This is how it's splitting up the work amongst themselves. Now again, this will be specific to each type of organisation, what its functions are, what it needs to do, and how it thinks it should set itself up. So this is an example, not an exemplar. Okay. The next thing this organisation is doing is setting up the boundaries between governance and management. And it uses something called a scheme of delegation to do this. Do you know, one of these days I'll say this and it will just jump to the right document just as exactly as I say it. What's up? Is it crashed? Is it doing? There we go. Okay, so here we've got something called a scheme of delegation to officers. So in local government speak, officers are staff. So it's saying what they've delegated to the staff. So it's specifically putting down what management should be looking after. And it's saying why they're doing that. Now remember what we said before. A board tends not to be there on a day-to-day basis in an organisation. And we talked about non-executive directors as part of that. And again, if you go on OneNote, there's a document explaining what that is and a video specifically for a Scottish organisation that's doing that. But if they're there in a governance position and only turn up to, say, monthly board meetings, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? How do you actually run the organisation every day? How can you be speedy and responsive in taking decisions? Well, you pass that on to management, and management will then take those decisions. But you have to say what they're allowed to take decisions on. So, oh, apologies. So this document says what they're allowed to take decisions on, what the limits of their powers are, and what the accountability is. So what they've said to begin with is, okay, anything that we've said isn't specifically reserved is delegated. In other words, unless the governance function has said, no, that's ours, everything else on a day-to-day basis will be run by management. And as you see in that document, what they're saying is, and as we saw last week in those pyramids, what they're tending to reserve is strategy and direction. Day-to-day are given over to the management. And it sets it up to say that while we're setting up this scheme of delegation and we're trying to list all the things, we might forget some. So the assumption is that management can do whatever they need to do unless it's specifically reserved. And then it starts talking about who does what. Oh, sorry, apologies. First it says specific powers that are reserved for governments. And again, I'm not going into these in detail because a lot of these are clearly very specific to this. Or another organisation, it might be whether or not to open or close a shop, or whether or not to change suppliers. It is very much dependent on the organisation itself. Yeah, there's only certain amounts of people who will require to have option C to appoint committees in terms of Section 57 of the Local Government Act. So it's, again, an example, not an exemplar. So it says what's reserved to governance. And part of that, not surprisingly, is about expenditure. And then it starts talking about what is going to be delegated. Starts off with general provisions, what they're expected to do, and then specific ones for specific managers. So here, the head of service, democratic services, has responsibility for communications and legal issues. Executive director for economy and communities has economic growth and libraries and coastal economy. Someone else has schools. Another one has finances and ICT. So it'll just depend on what their functions are, what sort of powers are going to be delegated to them. So we're starting to see a scenario where this organization have set up what they want. They've set up the aims of the organization. They've called it a plan. They've set up how they're going to structure themselves, board, subcommittees, who's on them, what they're going to do. And they've set up delegation to management to do all the day-to-day stuff to make that happen. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was better, but clearly not. So they now have a setup where the organisation can progress and people will know what their job is, what they're going to do, and what they're supposed to get to. Almost, because I actually got another document. And this particular one is a joint one. So it's two different organisations. Same idea. Powers are going to be delegated to the officers, what they're going to do, what the management will do on a day-to-day basis, whose responsibility it is to do what. But in this case, they've been delegated powers from two different organisations going into one. But it's the same kind of idea. Core principles, what they're delegating, and what each particular manager gets delegated. Okay, so we're starting to see a framework. We're starting to see something set up with everyone knowing where they are and what they need to do. Everyone happy with that so far? I'm not looking at the screen. There is a poll up there, so just a yes, no poll if you're happy or not. And again, if you're not, just put the question in or come off mic or come on mic and just ask the question. Or we do anything new. Okay. All right. Um, the other thing that, or one of the other things that they'll set out for people that are on the board is a code of conduct. How they should conduct themselves, how they should behave. What do they do if they have competing interests? And again, we talked about this before? What if you serve on more than one board? How do people know that you're working on behalf of the board that you're at and not the board of the other organisation? How do you know when you give out a contract to wash the windows that the contract was let fairly and not simply given to the company owned by another board member? Well, that's where the registrable interests come in. You have to register an interest in anything that might cause an issue. So you have to say any other positions that you have. You have to say things that you own that might make a difference. You also have to register gifts and hospitality. And the idea of this is to make sure that you're not unduly influenced. So, for example, I occasionally go to conferences or meetings with organizations. And sometimes I'll get stuff. Notebook from IBM. Yeah, just a double blank notebook. Now, they didn't give me this because they love me. They give me this because they want me to use this every day, and every day I see it, I see IBM on it and think, oh, maybe IBM can help me out. On the other hand, it's not really going to do them an awful lot of good. A, I don't have any spend for UWS. And B, a notebook, even if I was so inclined, isn't exactly going to make me choose one supplier over another. So often there's a limit for these things. You know, if it's a gift under a tenner, you don't need to tell anybody. So a notebook or a pen. That's why you see them so often. People give these things out to keep their name in front of people, but not to make sure they're not have to be declared so that they don't think there's an interest. However, things above that, you might have to give an interest. If someone invited me to a conference and bought me dinner at a restaurant, I would have to declare the hospitality to say, yeah, they took me out, bought me a meal, and gave me a glass of wine. Now, that wouldn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. The reason for this, the code of conduct, is to say, no, you need to declare those things so that other people can decide. And again, you've seen examples of that just this week. If certain members of the government had several months ago said, oh, by the way, I have an issue here with my tax, I'm going to tell you all about it so that nobody thinks I'm hiding anything, they might have been okay. I doubt it, but they might have been. But they tried to hide things. The idea with this code of conduct is everything's out in the open. So if you get that meal, if you get that trip to see Scotland play rugby, if you get whatever it happens to be, you can decide whether or not that has made a difference, had any influence on decisions taken by those people. So all organisations have these types of things, public, private, whatever. So yes, an anti-bribery policy would cover these. And tracker, sorry, Sally, and tracker, I'm not sure what that means.
We have a tracker where we have to note anything we're given. Like at Christmas, we occasionally get bottles of, alcohol from clients, etc. Thank you, but we have to note them on a tracker so we know exactly who's been given what and by whom, which falls in part of the anti-bribery policy.
Yep, absolutely. So they don't call it a tracker, they call it a register. And if I scroll down, you can see that the first person there says that they work at another organisation and get money from them. I think most of this is going to be empty. I'm looking for something. There we go. So there's somebody who has said that they're members of all these other things to make sure that if they make a decision, people can say, oh, hang on, you took a decision and you are a member of the Clyde Muirshiel Regional Joint Park Management Committee. At least it allows people to make up their minds whether there's any conflict of interest. So yes, this is the tracker or register of interests, and you can see that there's multiple categories. Places that you get money from, other undertakings, so other jobs that you might have, other contracts that you might have, house, land or buildings that might have a problem, shares and securities, non-financial interests. There's the gifts and hospitality. There's Sally's bottle of wine. And every member of this board will fill those out and sign them off to say whether or not they have these. Here's someone who's a director of a company. They've also chosen to say that their spouse is a director. The transparency part there is important. Contracts. Houses, land and buildings. Shares and securities. Non-financial interests. No gifts and hospitality. Okay, so everyone's set this up in order to ensure that they're transparent in their dealings elsewhere. As part of that, there will also be rules for buying things, rules relating to contracts and contract procedures. So it's saying how they happen. So you can't just go, yeah, okay, give it to my mate Dave. If you're actually procuring some sort of service, then you have to go through some rules. Not for everything, because it would be difficult, to say the least, if you wanted some paper clips and had to go through a procurement process. So there'll be limits on it. Here's what you have to do if it's up to a tenner. Here's what you have to do if it's up to 100. Here's what you have to do if it's up to 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 or 10 million or whatever it happens to be. And there would those different levels will have different amounts that you need to do. They'll also have different authorization levels. You know, the chair of the board of governors doesn't have to sign off on the paper clips, but they might have to sign off on a £10 million procurement for a new building. So there'll be layers for who's responsible. And we're back again to delegation. Here's what you can do, and here's the limits of it. And that'll be included in part of that. I do a quick search for a pound sign. There we go. This person is allowed to enter into a contract for the supply of goods and materials up to the value of £1 million. they're also allowed to do it for more than £1 million, but they have to tell people if there's an emergency. So again, they try and set out the rules and regulations when this would happen. This person is 100,000, or in some cases 500,000, or in some cases 5,000. This one's 50,000. So different amounts at different times in different areas, depending on what's going to happen. £1,000, 10,000, 100,000, £1 million. And that's an interesting point that James makes. Multiple contracts of £999,999 could be given to the same company or person. So yes and no. So again, part of the rules will be what defines a contract. And where you're giving multiple contracts all as part of one thing, that would be caught as part of this. There's also the fact that although there's no permission required to give these contracts, they are still examined elsewhere, and that's important too. So someone else will look at this. So in this particular case, it will be the finance director, say, who will look at all these contracts and go, hang on, what have you been doing here? Are you trying to get around the rules? So there are checks and balances, and there need to be, so you're quite right, James. And you see those checks and balances not always available in all spheres. People are allowed to donate X amount of pounds to a politician or a political party. And if you donate £10,000 or more, it has to be written down somewhere. So you get all these donations of 9,999 from somebody and their husband and their son and their daughter. So all of a sudden you end up donating 40,000, but nobody's had to write it down anywhere. In this particular case, that's not allowed, because even though you have that authority, there will still be checks and balances, and the checks and balances are important, and you're quite right to bring that up. Any other questions about that? Okay. One of the places you may want to look, again, it's on the OneNote document, is an organisation called OCEG. So they're a non-profit, and they create a whole bunch of documents about how GRC is supposed to work. Now, this isn't something that you'll sign up for yourself. It is mostly a corporate thing, and a lot of these things are expensive. But they do something called the Red Book, which is the basics of GRC. You can see the sorts of organisations that are involved in this. Some you have heard of, others you won't, but they're all important companies in their own areas. And it gives you an idea of what the concepts are behind governance, risk, and compliance. So that's a good overall document to give you that idea. And one of the things that it talks about is learn, align, perform, review. Because of course, the reason that we're doing all this is to make our organisation better. No point otherwise. What we're trying to do is come up with a way of ensuring that our organisation is the best, either in its own terms, best it can be, or the best in comparison to other organisations that are doing similar things. We are better than those people down the road. We're better than that other company. We are better than whatever. So a core part of governance is about getting better, and it's about actively getting better. In other words, it doesn't just happen by accident. You have to think about it. So what we're going to look at isn't learn, align, perform, review, but it's one of the other ways that we can do this. So they've got LARP. I'm going to cover something called PDCA. It's the same kind. Instead of learn, align, perform, review, we are going to plan, do, check, and act. So we're going to plan what our organisation should be like, what it should be doing. And you saw that with that plan that we had earlier. We're then going to do that. We're then going to check that what we were doing works in the way that we wanted it to. And then we're going to act on the outcome of that. All in the aim of ensuring that our organisation is the best that it can be. So as I say, you'll see these expressed in different ways. I've chosen plan, do, check, act, but you'll see other ones, and you saw that in the OCEG document. But the whole idea stays the same. It's about getting better. And it's about continuously getting better. So it's iterative. We don't go, yes, we got better. Yay us. Let's all go home. It's, we got better. So what's the next step? How do we keep going? And as I say, there's lots of names for this. Lots of people have tried to codify it in different ways. And you'll see it under different names. But we'll just do PCDA, or PDCA rather. Ha! There we go. I need an iterative check on my presentations. Because it's PDCA and I've written PCDA. So I need to get better. For those of you who are into IT, think of the software development cycle. You do something, you check it, you make it better, and you go through that iterative approach continually. You never stop. You never stop trying to get better. So you start off with a plan, and again, we saw that slightly earlier with our council plan. They've decided what it is that they want to do. They've decided the areas that they want to concentrate on, and they've said what success looks like, and that's important. Can't cheat. You have to decide beforehand what success means. Then you go away and you do whatever it was you said you were going to do. Hopefully, that will then get your objective, or at least go some way towards your objective. So you check what you're doing. And hopefully you're going in the right direction. Hopefully you're getting better. And then at some point you will reach your objective. It's not always just like that one huge leap though. Quite often what you want to do is split it down. If you're running an organization with 100 shops and your aim is to get to 110, you might not want to say, okay, let's open 10 shops. You might want to say, okay, let's open one shop, and then we'll open another shop, and then another shop, and another shop, and start to build it up that way. It can be difficult to get the staff together to do a whole set of shops at once. It can be difficult for management to concentrate on all of them. So maybe better to do multiple steps. And also, if you're getting something wrong, you're better learning about it. So you open one shop and you realise, oh, we've done this wrong. We've put it in the high street and it should have been an industrial estate, or vice versa. We've put it in an industrial estate. What we really needed was passing trade. Do it with one, you can learn for the next one. Do it with 10, and you've got 10 times the problems. So maybe split up into smaller steps, which are easier to understand, and it ensures that any problems that you have are that much smaller. And again, for those of you in IT, you'll be familiar with A/B testing. For those of you that aren't, it refers to something that anyone who has the opportunity to change things easily will do so. You might even have seen it. You'll go onto Amazon one day and the screen will look slightly different. What Amazon's doing is testing. So they have an A version, which is the original way that their front page looks, and then they'll have a B version. And they might be testing to see whether they can send you towards buying more Kindles, or send you towards getting your groceries with Amazon Fresh, or whatever it happens to be. So rather than having a big bang change where they change it for everybody, they'll change it for, say, 10% of the people that land there. So A is the original one, B is the new one, and they'll test it. Did this work? Did we do what we wanted to do? And also, were there any unintended consequences? Has it meant that people buy fewer things from our general shop? Has it meant that they don't find other stuff? So they can do this testing. Whole point is split it up, keep it small, and be able to change as and when you need to. So we plan it, we do it, and then we check against what we wanted to do. We get the data and where we are to understand whether or not we're going in the right direction. Hopefully we are, and hopefully we're doing it at a speed that we are comfortable with. We don't always. Sometimes we get it wrong and we actually go backwards. But it's important to check, important to understand whether you're doing the right thing. And it's also important to understand what you're checking that against. So again, it goes back to setting up what success looks like. So you need to make sure that your testing is correct as well. And then you change. Based on everything that you've done, based on the changes that you've made, based on the effect that they have had, based on what you've understood about everything that you're doing, you make changes. So I've got in act, it might be adjust, so you might be doing the right thing, but you just want to make wee tweaks here and there. Or it could be bigger changes. You realise that you're going in the wrong direction, you realise that you can't do what you're doing, but what you wanted to do, the way that you are doing it. Either way, you make those changes and you go back. You make the changes and you plan how they're going to be implemented, and then you do that, and then you check them, and then you act, and then you plan, and then you do, and then you check, then you act as many times as you need to do to fix it. And of course, I've got a nice big solved box in there. Yes, we've done it. And that might be okay for discrete projects. But it might be the case that for some of the things that you're doing, there's never going to be a solved because you're just trying to get better. You're trying to keep going and make sure that your organization is doing the best thing it can at all times. So it's really important that everyone's on board. Everyone has to understand that you're trying to get better, that you're trying to get a better organization, or whatever the aims of your organization are. more sales, more people helped, whatever it happens to be. And you never really get to the point where you go, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. You don't increase sales by 10% and go, yep, that's okay. You go, well, okay, can we do more? Can we get better? If your IT system goes down once a week, do you go, I'm fine with that because it used to go down once a day? Or do you think, well, actually, can we now move to once a month and then once a year? So instead of saying, yeah, we've reached the end, our target becomes our new baseline. So we start getting better, better, and better because we want our organization to be better and better and better. We're learning, aligning, we're performing, we're reviewing to make our organization better. And that's a key part of GRC. Nobody's saying anything in the chat or anywhere else. I'm assuming you're all happy with this so far. Okay, so everyone's trying to make their organization better. Some people will be looking at the organization as a whole. Some people will be looking at the parts for which they are responsible. Either way, it will all feed in. One of the things you want to be thinking about is, well, how do you actually decide what plans you're making? I've said you're going to plan, you're going to do, you're going to check, you're going to act. Oh, what is it you're going to plan? What is it you actually need to do? So maybe what you want to do is start to think about the issues that you have. And again, there are lots of techniques out there to do this. This isn't the technique, it is a technique that's helpful. And it's something called the 5 whys. What we're trying to do is identify issues. Importantly, it's not just about what happened. It's about why it happened. What was the root cause? What caused something to work the way it did, or more importantly, not work the way it didn't? It's called the 5 whys because quite often you'll need to ask the question multiple times, and 5 is a kind of a rough number of whys you'll need to ask to get to the actual root cause of a problem. But you might need to do it more than once. So let's give you an example. You're running a delivery company. You go out in the morning, you start your delivery van, or rather you don't because it doesn't. And you want to understand what's going wrong. Why doesn't the van start? Well, the battery's dead. Excellent. What we do is we take the battery out, we charge it up, and we start again. The van's started, everyone's happy. Except no. Because the 5 whys says, well, yes, you've got a cause. Is that the cause? Yes, you could put a sticking plaster over it, charge the battery, put in a new battery, and your van will start. Aren't you interested in why the battery was dead in the first place? Because in an engine, there is a system whose job it is to charge the battery as you're driving. It's called an alternator. So why didn't the alternator charge the battery? Let's have a look at the alternator. Maybe the alternator's broken. Oh, excellent. Yes, it is. So we can stop there. The alternator was broken. It wasn't charging the battery, and everyone's happy. No. Maybe we want to know why the alternator's broken. Maybe it's that the alternator, like lots of things on a vehicle, needs checked and replaced at a regular time. You need to service vehicles regularly, either by time or by distance. In this particular case, the alternator has something called an alternator belt. So the engine turns, that mechanical energy is sent via a belt to the alternator, which converts the mechanical energy to electrical energy, which charges the battery, and the belt broke because it was beyond its useful life. Excellent, we replace the belt. Well, no. Why did the belt break? Because it wasn't replaced in time. So we're getting finally to a root cause of the problem. The reason the van didn't start in the morning is because it's not been properly maintained. So what we actually need to do is set up a service schedule. We don't need to replace the battery or the alternator or the belt. Actually, we might have to do all of those things. But more importantly, to stop it happening again, we want to set up a service schedule. And then, of course, we might want to continue that in. Why wasn't it set up? Well, we don't have a process to set up routine maintenance. So maybe we need to put that into our standard operating manual. So we need to set that up. We need to plan what that maintenance schedule should be. We need to do it. And then we need to check, are the vans still working? Or are they still breaking down because of the schedule? And if they are, maybe we need to adjust the schedule. Maybe the service schedule is for an average use of a van, whereas what we're doing is driving half a mile, stopping, getting out, delivering a parcel, getting back in, turning on again, driving another half mile, getting out, delivering a parcel, coming in. Maybe our service schedule needs to be different. So we can adjust it. And then we can go through that cycle until we get to the point where our vans don't break down anymore. Now, it's important when we're doing this that everybody's involved, management and staff, that we go into it with no preconceived notions and just start writing down issues and problems that people know. It's important we don't focus on the causes. We need to understand the symptoms. So we don't focus on the battery, we get to the point where we can focus on the service schedule. So we need to understand that link. So we need to ask the question, what happened? And therefore the battery was dead, and therefore it wasn't charged, and therefore the alternator wasn't working, and therefore it wasn't turning, and therefore, until we get to the end. And it's really important that we only look at the process. We never get to the, oh, it was Fred's fault or it was Wilma's fault. No, it has to be about process and the problem, not about people. So you can go through this, get to an end point and go, yeah, now we know what the issue is. And of course, what you want to do for an organisation is not think about it in terms of what's important for the organisation, it's what's important for your users, your customers, the people that rely on you. Any questions about that? No. Okay. In that case, Let me stop the recording.